What's going on, everybody? Today I have an update for you on the FZ6. Now, I read all the comments in that video where I reached out for help, and I really appreciate all the comments, all the insight, and all the experience you guys have had collectively that kind of guided my process going through trying to resolve this misfire. So the first thing I had to do was, of course, the bike sat over the winter and the battery was on its last legs. So I had to get a new battery, so we start off this season and this diagnostic with a brand new battery. The bike starts fine and has no problem starting on its own battery, and I've checked the voltage and the battery voltage is A-OK. So we've ruled that out of the problem. It doesn't have low voltage at the idle. The first thing that really stood out to me in the comments was a comment mentioning corrosion on pins in the wiring harness or connecting to the ECU. So the first thing I did was that. I basically took apart the tank, got into the bike, and popped off the ECU and got this clip. Okay, so we got the tank off and all its fuel lines disconnected. This is the ECU right here with this big honking connector right here. It looks like it's just a push down and pull out kind of connection, so I'm gonna get it now. Hopefully this goes well, and hopefully we find something. First thing to do before disconnecting your ECU is disconnect the battery, because you don't want to short something out on your ECU with the battery connected. Well, we got the ECU disconnected. I can't really see into these pins very well. I'm gonna take the ECU right out of where it's mounted to, and to get better access to the bolts that hold it in place, I'm gonna take out this bracket which is held in here and here, which holds the rectifier, and just, move it aside. Right here and on the other side of the ECU. So we got the ECU out and propped up here, and just looking at the pins, I don't really see anything alarming. I really don't see anything. Either way, I'm gonna try and get in there and just clean it up a little bit. While we're in here just like unplugging things, I'm gonna unplug the rectifier regulator module and check for corrosion there. I'm also gonna check these two main harness wiring connections. The slightest bit of junk I found is in the regulator rectifier pins. I did find this crusty stator connector, so I gave it a good clean, and I got the pins looking pretty clean now. The plug still has a bit of grot in it, but it's a lot cleaner than it was. And then this one's looking a lot better too. It still has grot in it, as you can see when it hits the sun, but it still looks all right. Now we'll put the ECU back in, but before we do that, we pray. We pray in the shadow of the FZ6 to have resolved the issues, and may the good motorcycle gods shine down on us with a smile. Now let's put it in. One thing to note when putting the rectifier in, it's not just these two bolts that hold it in place. You can see that window there, it has like a tang. This like rubber grommet goes through, up and under, and you gotta slide it onto the tang. There we go, you see it slide on a tang, get the holes to line up, and that's where it locates. So after going through all that work of trying to check the ECU and make sure all the wiring harness connections are clean and crud-free, I didn't really discover anything alarming, certainly not at the ECU end, but I did discover that crusty stator pin, but I cleaned it up and it didn't make a difference. Not willing to go down without a fight, that day I took the bike home and I gapped down the plugs. They were originally at 27 thousandths of an inch, is what I left it at the end of last season. I gapped them down to 22 thousandths of an inch, which is like the minimum spec for the original plugs that went in this bike, so I figured that's kind of as low as I want to go, and it was a 4 to 5 thou movement on that plug gap. And that improved the misfire just a little bit. It still doesn't idle smoothly, but when you're accelerating off from zero, like clutching out and accelerating, if you keep the revs like under 2,000, it might misfire and chug a little bit, but most of the time it doesn't. And it used to do that always when you're under 2,000 clutching out. So the misfire still exists, and one of the things I forgot to mention earlier in the video just today was that I've been running like an injector cleaner through the fuel. I've done 2 tanks on this bike since this has all began, like since the end of last season and now. So it's had 2 tanks of fuel injector cleaner through it, and it really hasn't changed anything. Last season too, just off camera, I had the tank up and I was checking for vacuum leaks. I checked for vacuum leaks all around, like where the ITBs meet the rubber boots that go to the cylinder heads, and nothing was leaking there. I really haven't found any vacuum leaks. The only thing that's on my mind that I should probably check is some of the hoses that connect to the ITB rack to make sure that there's no hairline cracks in them causing them to leak, but I'm a bit stuck. I've got the bike to the point now where it's not a nuisance to drive. Like, the misfire only really presents itself at idle and taking away from a stop sometimes. Otherwise, it's all right, it's livable. Like, it's not gonna prevent me from riding the bike, but my mechanic heart just wants me to fix it somehow, some way. The next couple steps I have in mind for trying to fix this misfire is changing out the ignition coils and leads. Although I checked them last season and everything measured to be within spec, it's just possible that they exist within the ignition coils and that the problem is intermittent and not showing up on a multimeter. So I like to change the ignition coils, and if that doesn't fix it, my next course of action would be to change the fuel pump. I kind of suspect that it could be the fuel pump, but like most people said in the comments, if it was fuel related or fuel pump related, you'd likely experience it at all RPMs, and I don't. It's definitely just a low RPM thing. The last two things I'd like to do that I've never done before on a bike like this is I'd like to clean the injectors. So that means taking the ITB rack out, disassembling the fuel rail, taking out the injector, and just applying pressure, applying voltage to it, and blowing cleaner through it. I'd have to research more about how to do that, but it's definitely something I'm going to be looking into to see if there's crud caught in the injectors that's causing one cylinder to misfire a little harder than the other. I could also pick up a thermal camera or an infrared sensor to check the temperatures on the exhaust hairs to figure out which cylinder in particular is having the misfire. But the problem is it doesn't really present itself on cold start, so you'd have to look at it when it's misfiring already up to temp, so I don't think you'd necessarily see a difference in the temperatures across the headers because it would already be up to temp, and it misfires very intermittently. It's not like a constant misfire where one cylinder would get cold in comparison to the rest. Finally, the last thing I'd like to do is really balance the vacuum on the ITBs, and that requires a fancy vacuum adjusting gauge, which I don't have. I tried to do an ITB balancing last season, but I bought a single vacuum gauge and it just wasn't the right type, and it wasn't going to work for balancing all four the same way. So I'm probably going to pick up that tool, but it's really not urgent and the tool's not cheap, so it's kind of on the back burner for me. But the update is the bike works, the bike runs, I'm riding it now. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to get around and do what I like to do with it. And the blessing is really that it only happens at idle and it never stalls the bike. I'm never sitting at a light and the bike dies. It's just kind of, and it just, it just bugs me. It doesn't bug anyone else. It's not like I'm bugging other people sitting in traffic with a bike going rah, 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 rah. It just simply doesn't run right, and it makes me unhappy. One thing I've kind of done is a band-aid fix to cover up the issue is I've raised the idle a little bit. The bike now idles around 1400 or 1500 RPM, and I find that just helps a little bit, taking away from a stop. So that's the update for you on what's going on with the FZ6. The misfire is still not resolved. I'm still on the hunt for a solution. I'll insert some clips right here. God, why can't I just have something that's problem-free? Anyways, I'm sorry I don't have a solution for you. I wish I could just have a solution for all of you, because then I'd feel like I could be making a great contribution towards the FZ6 community and all the troubleshooting things. But I don't have one for you yet. But trust me, I'm working on it this whole season. Although I might not make a video about every single step along the way of trying to troubleshoot this, just believe me, I am still working on trying to find a solution for this because it bugs me. It still bugs me. It doesn't make me happy about this vehicle. Thanks for watching, everybody. Smash the like and subscribe button down below if you made it this far in the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a good day.